Hi everybody and welcome back to another Product Latte. I'm Andrew Howe and today I'm drinking a little coffee. So I'm just going to enjoy this and then we're going to get straight into it. Okay, great. Well, today's session is we're going to talk about committed versus aspirational OKRs. Now, OKRs are a really hot topic. They've been flying around for a little while now. There's some really great books out there, Radical Focus being one of them, that will give you the baseline understanding of how OKRs work. So what I would suggest is if you haven't got up to speed on OKRs, go back, have a read through Radical Focus. I'll also put a link to a talk I did on outcome thinking, which touches on OKRs slightly, and I will do a follow-up session to this one, which goes into a little bit more depth on OKR basics. But here today, we're going to talk about committed versus aspirational. Now, when I first got into OKRs, I really understood that there was one type of OKR, and that was an aspirational OKR. And what I really found difficult as I got more mature in my understanding and utilization of OKRs was that it wasn't always right to feel like you were pushing something down the OKR route. And sometimes that's because not everything that we are doing is aspirational. Sometimes we are very much committed to delivering something. And in the product world, we like to tell the difference in the story between something that we're committed to and something that we're aspiring to achieve. So aspirational OKRs are really good at telling that aspirational story, and committed OKRs are telling us the real reality of the things that we can't not do, or we have some structural or time-bound problems or significant impacts if we don't achieve them. So they serve very different purposes, and they also can be read, interpreted, and acted upon in very different ways. So committed OKRs are just that. It's a goal that is very setting commitments, right? So there are things that individual team or individual organization has agreed must be achieved, and the resources are scheduled to be able to be put onto that so the job can get done. So when we're sequencing at a very, in a big organization or even in a small startup, sometimes we need to have clear commitments that we will achieve things within a bound time or a bound measure so that we know that we've achieved that outcome. Time's a challenging one because time commitments tend to be challenging because they're always the unknown, and that always raises risk. But commitments can not always be time bound, and they can be based on hitting a level or hitting a minimum requirement that is required to maintain the business or to reduce a risk or maintain a regulatory level within the organization. So resources are scheduled, like we said, and when grading it, we expect the score of the commitment to be a 1.0. So we don't have a 0.3 or a 0.7. It is 1.0 or nothing, right? And that's the great thing about committed OKRs. There's no aspirational steps that we're achieving. We're going for an all or nothing outcome. A lower score requires a discussion, and also it shows that there's an opportunity to adjust, improve the plan, where in the committed world, that may not be the case, right? So we need to remove some of the noise around those things and clear that focus up to the goal that must be achieved. Aspirational OKRs obviously work slightly differently. We like to look at the world, we have an open view, and sometimes we call, a 10x goal moonshot. So we're trying to get that 1.0. It's a moonshot goal. We want to try and get out there. I think Google X or the X Factory are really good at OKR, like moonshot OKRs. So that's a really good place to come have a look. And the sentiment is best sort of encapsulated in we're measuring what matters, right? So I think the main thing here is with those aspirational OKRs, there's no clear path to get there, right? It's not laid out. We haven't, got a clear, sequence of this thing leads to that thing. What we're talking about here is a thing that we want to try and to achieve, and we're really going to try and work out how best to do that through the delivery and the process that we're going to go into in the pathway that we create. So the real knowledge of what resources will be required is there isn't any, right? We're not sure about what we need. We go in there with an idea, like we need some developers, we need a UX person, but when you get into the nitty gritty of it, you may need some commercial people and some other people to come on board to try and make that a reality. So they also may roll over, right? So where our committed OKR is very specific and says something like, we will hit this level or we will do this by this point. After that point, we're back in the BAU, right? We're back in the business as usual, and that committed OKR disappears because it's already been achieved and we've released that 1.0 outcome. In the aspirational world, these OKRs can roll over from one quarter to the next, especially if you have a long-term goal which requires a lot of effort to be able to get to. So a aspirational OKR may be achieved within a quarter, it may not. That's not a bad thing. It just means that you have a big or a smaller goal that you're trying to achieve and you're aspiring to. So the average score here within an aspirational OKR that we're aiming for is the 0.7, but we have some variance for room. We've spoken about this before, where we have a range within aspirational OKRs to give us that flexibility. So we have our 0.3, which is the lower range of what we're trying to achieve. It's the things that we're bare minimum that we want to get through the door. And then our 1.0, on the other hand, is that we've outperformed and stretched ourselves to the limits and things have just clicked into line like a shooting star, and we've been able to achieve that unbelievable outcome and aspire to that thing. So I think it's really clear, there's a really clear definition there that, you know, in the committed OKR, we're committing to something, it's a 1.0 or nothing. There's no follow-on after that. It is business as usual once it's completed. In the aspirational world, we have a range of outcomes that can be achieved. There's no defined minimum amount of resource that's required to achieve that at the start of it. And, you know, we're aiming for that 0.7 rather than the 1.0. And again, these can roll over from one quarter to another. It's not the same as the committed, where once that's achieved, that within that period is over and it's done with. So those are the core differences that we need to just call out. Right, so one of the things that can, so what are the traps here? Let's talk about some traps. Committed OKRs, some of the traps that we're talking about are things like low value objectives, or LVOs as people call them, right? These are common pitfall that people fall into, and basically if you're a senior leader at any part of the business and you see an OKR, a committed OKR where you just go, well, what the hell is that and why do I care about it? Because there isn't really anything there other than you're saying that you're going to do something, right? And that means that there's lack of impact, lack of value, and lack of understanding why you're trying to commit to something so heavily. So we've got to be really careful about just creating an OKR for an OKR for any old reason. And what tends to happen is you'll find is that these common pitfalls around OKRs is that people will just create an LVO. And basically whether that should have been a BAU task or an SLA or a KPI. So let's first off not fall into that that committed trap, because we don't want to just be using OKRs as a delivery measure. Common mistakes around aspirational OKRs are some things like creating aspirational OKRs, you know, first and foremost, making sure that we're clearly defining either the fact that it's committed or aspirational when we're writing it. And that should be in the fact that the actual objective should be inspiring. Like we should be inspiring, and the terminology and wording that we're using within the objective and the KR should lead us very clearly to understand whether this is on the committed side or the aspirational side. So I think there's a key place around transparency here when the writing of OKRs. And look, OKR writing is a bit of an art form. It takes a bit of time to get used to be able to do it. But we're trying to make it aspirational, exciting, and a vision rather than something that's very committed, straight, narrow, focused, and clear when the committed side. You want to make sure that you're using good KRs, clear, smart things that are measurable, and that when you're, especially on the aspirational side, are moving you closer to where you want to be. That's something that's really important to make sure that you've got that measures of what matters in the aspirational sides of your OKRs. On the committed side, again, you need smart things, ability to measure that you've met the success of the 1.0. That means that your KR needs to have a clear definition of what that achievement will be, and it is clear for everyone to understand when it's been achieved. This is really clear. Fall over one way or another into things that you shouldn't be doing. Remember, you've got committed resource, maybe for a short amount of time, to deliver something at cost to the business. So you need to be making sure that in that world of commitment, that it's efficient, effective, and highly productive in what you're doing, but really effective in driving that committed outcome. Look, there's loads and loads of really good material out there. This is just a really short snippet. This was a real eye-opener for me, especially when it came to understanding how I could be more clear in what my types of work were between committed and aspirational. But it's also a really big reminder that not everything fits under an OKR, and that is fine. And then there are other measures, other metrics, other mechanisms in place within our businesses to be able to measure, monitor, and maintain those things. So don't forget that those things exist as well. Hope this has been useful. Another one of these to come soon. Enjoy your coffee. Have a good week. Bye.